Hey, welcome back. This is Mira and Gregg, or Gregg and Mira, depends on how you want to say it. Today we're going to be talking about an interesting conversation, I think. It's kind of confusing as well. And it's basically the idea of globalist versus nationalists under a democratic convention or under democratic terms. And I want to be clear when I'm talking about globalism, I don't mean Silk Road globalism, which is the idea of economic exchange and migration and exchange of cultures under a complete global, not dystopia, but under a global idea that we're all world citizens. But more, I'm talking about the idea of globalism as the idea that takes over the world and removes all boundaries and removes borders from nations and includes the globalist look at redefining government, removing government from national nation states and putting it under a central control of one world agency. I know that Mira doesn't like when I tell her or call her an expert, but she's far more of an expert on this than I am. With that, Mira, can you give us any
Yeah,
definitions of any of these terms, and then maybe we'll see if we can make any sense of them.
that was nice. That word dystopia, it looked like a Freudian
I
slip.
meant utopia. I meant utopia, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm an expert in the sense that I've studied so much about this topic, but I might be quite biased about it because I see you clearly define what you mean by globalism, and for me, I cannot see it as like detached from the globalism that has happened and is happening, that is mostly based on the financial part and that goes against internationalism, but not so much nationalism. So that's, I think, the paradox, and maybe that's the difference between us two in this concept of globalism.
Can I
Because,
stop you there?
yep,
Only because I've
please.
never heard the term internationalism used in this type of discussion. So can you give us a quick summary of that or a background of that?
Yeah, so it's quite a left-wing concept, which, yes, I mean, yeah. And it's it there that has nothing to do with the part of financial flaws or the exploitation of the cheaper workforce in underdeveloped country, but it's mostly based on a fair redistribution of resources and also on equality between countries and states and on the respect of human rights everywhere, which this looks like a utopia, I know, but I mean, again, for the fourth time, okay, this is the fourth episode, I still believe that maybe someday I won't be there, maybe someday there will be some kind of internationalism, which for me it's the contrary of nationalism, but the
Well, yeah, I
existing
will agree to that.
globalism.
I'll agree to that. But it sounds a lot more like this idea of internationalism is the same thing as the what was that? That is the same thing as globalism because it's even though it sounds based on your definition that it's the left woke, excuse my terminology, agenda type of idealism, it still falls under the same charter, I guess, as I would say what globalism is, because globalism is an exchange of commodities and ideas and migrations, and it's a resetting of the current culture.
Maybe exchange of culture, but nothing to do with the part of what globalization and globalism means. Because, I mean, you said for the walk, excuse my expression, I mean, I'm fine. I mean, for my definition of walkism and walk, I'm good. So no problem there. But you know, for internationalism, you cannot outsource your, I don't know, the jobs from a developed country like Italy or France to a country in Africa just because you want to pay how do you say, cheaper, smaller salaries, and you prefer countries where there is no labor code. So this is the current globalism, and that has nothing to do with internationalism in the sense of what I think as a left-wing like ideology or concept. But I mean, there is no internationalism. So this is something written in the paper. We haven't seen it until now. I'm not sure if we will see it like live, but the globalism of today, it's mostly an exploitation of underdeveloped countries. But you said that it's against nationalism, and that's what I wanted to ask you. Why do you think this? Because I think completely the contrary. I think that those nationalist countries are using globalism to exploit cheaper workforce.
Well, I think I see it the exact opposite way that globalists are trying to control the nationalist movement. And let's try to clarify what we're talking about. So, if nationalism is the idea that individual countries, individual states have the right to self-protection and they have the right to have borders and they have their own national identity, I guess that is at odds of globalism that seeks to remove borders and make the planet a place of quote-unquote world citizens. What is a world citizen? A world citizen is theoretically, under that construct, should be somebody who can move around the world at will. Is that what globalism is supposed to bring for us? Because it just can't necessarily work, because everybody's going to want to go to all the same great places on the planet, and I think that's kind of a truth. I don't know if that's the best argument, but it's a truth to the idea. But the contrast between nationalism and globalism, I think, is just that. It's the idea of a country being itself and maintaining its own sovereign control of its people. That's a horrible word. Leadership of its people, as opposed to globalists, where who are the leaders in this globalist utopia that we're talking about? I mean, are we doing world vote now? Is that something that's even possible? I mean, electronically speaking, it is, but is that something that's going to be exploited just like democracy is in a lot of other countries? So for me, the idea of globalism and nationalism couldn't be any starkly different. One is a collective of nations they're all on their own agenda, versus one nation that controls all people in theory and has universal laws, I suppose, and then you have no prospect for future democracy, because let's theorize that this global government turns tyrannical. Where are the people to go at that point? You can't leave the country unless you're leaving the world, unless you're with Elon Musk and you're flying off to Mars someplace. If you have no borders and you have only one government, that is basically opening everybody on this planet for tyrannical leadership. So I know that sounds a little hyperbolic, but that's kind of my, rough man on the street definition of what's the difference between globalism and nationalism. Is that not how you see it?
No. You mentioned Mars and Elon Musk, and
Oh, here we go.
one of yeah no, one of my ideas when I'm desperate and I'm always asking myself, oh, where I should live in order to live in a place with gender equality and this and that. And then I say, okay, let's go to another planet. And then I read Mars Chronicles. I'm not sure if this is the title in English, but it's of Ray Bradbury, which is a US author mostly talking about dystopias. After reading that, also Mars became like Earth, so no hope. But going back to globalism and nationalism, I think that I understand. I mean, I fully understand what you mean, but I don't see it as I don't see it as opposed to nationalism from an ideological point of view, like left and right, because until now, what we've seen, like this global government, if I could say, it's not existing, but if I could say that existed, it's like mostly, the rich guys that are meeting at Davos in Switzerland.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
100%. This comes from the idea of the Agenda 2030 and the new beginning. I can't remember what they call this. It's definitely born from the Davos environment, where these millionaires and billionaires, or corporate heads and now politicians, are meeting in order to tell the rest of the world, middle class and lower class, how to live their lives. The fact that we're not going to own property, the fact that we're going. I don't want to be ridiculous and start bringing up a bunch of the ideas like eating bugs and things like that. Regardless, I know those things were mentioned, but I think the idea is more based on elitists having power and control, and everybody else being at the bottom, reducing the, I guess, pyramid of humanity from the super rich to the super poor, and the masses on the bottom, to only the super rich and politicians and everybody else, in a way that reduces the power of individuals to control, how they live their lives. Basically, the ultimate paternal society where these elitists are telling people how to live their lives, and they can't own things, and they have to basically have special rights to travel, because if they don't, they're going to destroy the atmosphere. It seems like a mechanism of control.
There is a bunch of information there. I am
Sorry, I
trying
don't mean to
to.
preach. I don't mean to be preachy.
No, I mean, I'll try to process it because there are so many ideas and and everything. It's so interesting to like deconstruct. I love that word. So, but I mean, again, I don't like what happens in Davos because it goes against what I was saying about internationalism in the sense of a fair redistribution of resources, which is not happening, and none of these guys there is mentioning, and it goes also against the human right of freedom of movement, because mostly of these people, they love to keep their borders strong. So, and I think this is the paradox. They love the global financial flows, but not the freedom of movement of people. So, yeah, I mean,
Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought the idea of migration was heavily sanctioned under the globalist agenda. Is that not the case?
I'm not sure that this is happening because you see very well what is happening in the Mediterranean Sea. People are not allowed to come to the European Union because so there is a problem with the freedom of migration, sorry, of movement. And we also saw what happened with Syrian refugees and the deal that was done with Turkey in order to keep the refugees there so that they could not come to Greece or to the other countries in Europe, as in Italy. And mostly there are the leaders of these countries and other countries that are talking about this globalization of financial flows. So we love to outsource the jobs, we love to exploit other countries, but we don't like to have you coming in our countries. So the globalization until now, it's this. And personally, I'm completely against it. So, yeah, I don't know what you think about it.
Well, I think that it sounds like politicians and corporate heads are talking out of both sides of their head, or both sides of their face. I'm not sure the expression. Because based on what you're telling me, every nation seeks to participate in the ideal of globalism until it takes down their border. So I'm wondering if this is all just a prelude or just an opportunity to, go to Davos once a session and participate in order to have business gains and pretend that you're going to participate in this globalization scheme, but really nobody intends on doing it. That would be my idea of what is really going on, because they are, as you say, they're contradictory in their origin. You can't have a globalist society if you don't give up your nationality. It's one or the other. I've heard people talk about you can live with both, but you're not living with both if they're neither of them are real. If it's real nationalism, you have a sovereign border and you have people that you represent, and the exact opposite for globalism. So I have a difficult time kind of imagining how globalism will really take place. So it's just an inconsistent idea for me.
You said that you mentioned every country. So,
And clearly, not every country.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's mostly the rich countries. So, uh, and there was in the last COP, it's the conference for Conference of Parties for the climate change, the last one that was done in December, if I'm not wrong, or in January. I think it was in December 2024, and it was in Azerbaijan. And there was a huge discussion regarding climate change goals, because you know that the most polluting countries are the rich countries. So these countries are like making more damage to our planet. And you have all these small countries, especially the small islands, that are suffering to like disappear in some years because of all this polluting. And normally, there is a discussion about how the rich countries should help these other countries in order to face climate change. And the amount was so ridiculous
Yeah.
that like most of the delegation of these small countries, they were like, okay, are you kidding with us? You had countries from Africa that were really angry, like, you are dumping everything on us and now you're not helping while you are so rich. So I think that for the rich countries, this is the globalization. Like, let's exploit a little bit the other countries. It's mostly economical,
Well, I don't know if I
which,
can agree with that because it seems to me if I'm to place what are the two most rich countries on the planet, I would say the United States and China. I could be wrong. There could be some other countries that are pretty close.
yeah.
Russia has a strong economy. Denmark has a strong economy. There are other countries with a great deal of resources. Australia has a ton of mineral resources. I think they're the number one producer of fissionable material for nuclear reactors and weapon systems. So they clearly have a lot of money as well. And right off the bat, I don't think America is, in general, a big partner in the idea of globalism. In fact, I think everybody would agree that Trump is the face of anti-globalism. He's the face of
Yes.
nationalism. And China, I pretty wholeheartedly believe that China is not in any position to be trying to develop a globalist existence as well.
But many companies, I think many US companies, yes, they
Yes,
have exploited workforce in China or in Bangladesh or in other
we're
countries.
everywhere.
So this is globalism. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the globalism until now. But
So
I really wanted to
it's
ask you
a
about
potential.
nationalism.
Okay, what do you want to know? I'll tell you what
No,
I know.
what you think? What you think about it?
Well, I think having nationalism is the only way to maintain democracy, because without another option, ideally in an imaginary world, they'll say there's two countries. As long as there's two, you have an option to go from one to the other, and that is, part of the definition of democracy. You vote with your presence. So if you're, under the nationalist ideal, you can maintain democracy with your ability to leave that nation, I suppose, and you can't do that under a singular government. And what is nationalism beyond that? It's sovereign borders, national security, individual or national identity. That's what nationalism is to me. I could be wrong. I don't know anything.
No, I mean, I asked you, so that's fine. But don't you think nationalism has been like the cause of so many wars
Oh,
and
absolutely. I
hate
mean,
toward the others?
you can make
So
that
that's the
argument
problem
all day
with
long.
nationalism
Yeah,
with me.
nationalism created World War One and World War Two. It's very easily understood that those national identities decided to have a huge conflict, and that's how war began. But you can make an opposite argument that due to war, all these massive developments in technology and in medicine came about because of the violence that ensued during the war. So I mean, it's the cause and effect argument is easy to make when you're at the last step. Oh, this caused that, but there are plenty more steps before that put history in the picture that it's in. So, yes, nationalism is the antithesis for war because you can't have it otherwise. But what is war without borders, or what is the world without borders? I mean, if you are free to just move throughout the planet, there is no government at that point. Am I saying do we need government? I don't know we need the type of governments we have, but I don't foresee
Yeah.
a way of for humanity to exist without having the natural occurrence of tribalism that people seem to fall back to. You know, you have your family, you have your tribe, you have your people. Beyond that, you don't know what's out there. So you collect.
I mean, I'm not someone who loves borders. I think it has changed with age. I mean, like maturing and also thinking that internationalism is what I really appreciate most, maybe because it's also a utopia, so it's easier to think about it. I mean, I'm just thinking loudly now. So you might think that this is completely stupid, but I mean, I'm just throwing it there. But, I I mean, I can accept borders, but I think that it we can also find a way to like to build our identity not by hating the other, but
Mm.
loving ourselves but also loving the other. So, and I think that mostly the borders have been used or have been like strengthened by hating the other. And coming from the Balkans, and today I'm in Tirana, so like it's a literal, if I could
More
say
real for you?
so. It fits so well the theme of today. I mean, here in the Balkans, it's still present, and you have all these borders and all these kind of. You mentioned World War I and II, but here it's like more recent, and we've seen what borders created. And let me brag a little bit as a feminist that I am, that one of the things that has transcended borders in the Balkans is the feminist movement, which I'm really proud of, because we meet feminists from Serbia and Montenegro and Albania and Kosovo, etc., and there is such a good networking, and we are still Albanian and Serbian, etc. So I really think that we can have the borders, we can have our national identity without hating the other. So that's why I have this problem with nationalism. And I know that maybe this looks really childish, and especially to you with your experience that you have had like military. So maybe it's like so comfortable for me to talk about this from a very comfortable, I don't know, place, but I don't know. I'd like your thought on it.
Well, I don't look at having a border as, we'll say, me living in my world. I don't necessarily hate other people outside of my world or outside my border, but the border I look at more as a defense, because until we evolve to be better humans, or we come up with better reasons to not take what everybody else has, you need to defend yourself. You need to have. I'm all about strong national defense. Uh, Based on the fact not that I hate you, but that you might hate me, and I have to protect myself. So this is a defensive ideology of nationalism, where I'm going to go out and take over other nations, and I think the United States has a pretty good history of not being colonists, as opposed to some of the other nations out there. But regardless, we're not here to judge history, not necessarily. But the idea is that I'm pushing is not that we have borders because we hate you, but we have borders in case you hate us. The same thing goes for you. You, I'm sure, go to sleep in your bedroom. You may or may not close your door. You have your family around you. You have the borders of your home. Then you have the borders of the building you live in, or your yard, or what have you, your property. Those are the borders. Are the borders designed to protect you and your family, or your tribe, or your people, or your nation? They're not the borders that are meant to demonstrate hate for other people. I hope that's.
But I'd love to have this fantastic relationship with my neighbors, for example. So, and I don't know if I've told you, when I was in Iceland, the first time that I was in Iceland, they were not locking the door, and for me, going there from Paris was like, what is
I can
happening?
go steal all your
Because
stuff.
so you normally you lock the door, but and I mean it felt pretty good to not lock the door in the sense of having all this kind of I don't know, trust and
No, I understand.
solidarity that I yeah.
It's
So
small
no.
town living. The same thing can happen when you live in a small town. You know, people know each other, and there's enough of a knowledge base to know all your neighbors. Therefore, it's a lot more difficult for your neighbors to encroach on your rights. But when you have, unknown number of people and you can't know everybody, that's kind of like the origins of crime, I would imagine. Crime and anti-nationalism, if that's a thing, those are basically based from the same thing. They came from the same place. People that want what you have, and they're not willing to get it under what we would call quote unquote legitimate or moral ways of acquiring their stability. So that's
But don't
that's
you
that's that's the distinction between the Iceland small town. You love your neighbors and you don't need to defend yourself because there's kind of like a social net that's in place, a social force field that holds your neighbors at bay. But once they don't know you or you have something they want and you don't know their intentions, you arrive back again at the place where you need to protect yourself, protect your family, and compete with others under the legal construct of your nation.
but don't you think that we could make it in, I mean, we could change the current situation and make that the others or help the others have what we have? I
You
mean,
just
I
said
come
make
from
the
a
others.
modest
So do you
country
mean give the others?
that has never colonialized any other countries.
So you're talking about your neighbors. So did you mean give your neighbors something or make them have something? What was
Not to give or to gift, but like collaborate with each other, so we don't have this idea of stealing the other or going and like making I don't know, killing the other in order to steal from them. So okay, as again, that might look really an idealistic idea, but I mean, this is what I think it would be the only solution for our planet. On the other side, what I was thinking is that, don't you think that the politicians, I mean, when I say don't you think, it's really, I'm also like asking myself, they are playing so meanly, if I could use the word, with the nationalism and borders, because you said you don't hate the other, but you have all this nationalist rhetoric from many politicians, mostly right, but recently a lot of far left too, which is really like so unfortunate, and it really breaks my heart. But talking about the others and the sovereignty and the borders without thinking that you are just inciting a kind of closeness and also hate toward the other. So this is the problem that I have now. It's not about having your identity and cherishing your identity. It just is like your identity, it's in relation to how good you are compared to the others. And so I think this is really problematic.
Well, it is. It's very problematic, and it's the same issue that humans have been trying to resolve since the dawn of human intelligence, I suppose. We've tried to cooperate, and there always have been people that don't want to cooperate, and that's what you have to deal with. If there's an ideal way of doing things that you could construct, please spread it with us, because we all want to know it. We all want to have a better life. We all want to
You're
have.
mocking me. You're mocking me now.
I'm not mocking you, but what I'm saying is that your idea that things should be better is a bit simplistic, because we all want things to be better, and nobody's come up with a great mechanism yet. Because when you talk about politicians,
Better for themselves. Better for themselves, not for the others.
what do you mean by that?
I mean, politicians, they just see their very strict interest, like
Oh,
very
exactly. Yeah.
narrow
I
interest.
was I was I was about to say that. I would
Okay.
suggest that politicians are as close to tyrannical as you can in an actual government. The politicians seem to be, from my observations, the people that break the rules the most. You're constantly hearing this war cry in the United States right now: rules for thee, but not for me. You know, the idea that I'm going to make a rule, you're going to follow it, but I'm not going to. So adding politicians to this particular argument, especially under the idea that you're seeking an idealist way that humans and humanity is going to interact, that's probably a bad starting point. Politicians are not the best starting point. I'm sorry to say it. That's the reason we have, or we should have, a strong democracy to control the politicians of the world. It should not be the stance that people are afraid of the government. It should be the idea that the government's afraid of the people. And that's the stance we should live under. And that's what keeps, or that should keep, politicians at bay from exploiting the people they represent. That simply just doesn't exist right now. I mean, it exists in the idealistic Constitution of the United States, but the Constitution is trampled all day long by all three of the different bodies that are encompassed under its doctrine. So I'm sorry, I want to live, you know, in a perfect world too, but it just doesn't exist.
And like democracy is the perfect word. Because how can we build democracy without the politician? Or how can we
It's a good question.
keep them accountable to what they are doing? Voting once per 4 year, it looks a little bit like
A half
not
measure.
really the solution.
I would agree. I would agree. I'm a, you know, I don't advocate for breaking the law. Let me say that right now, so the FBI doesn't show up at my house later on today. However, I would be behind the idea of reestablishing and rewriting the Constitution. It's written under the wrong definition of what humanity is, and it is written for the elites. The Constitution is written so that elites have power, and it's specified in the three powers that will exist. And we all know that you have a hard time obtaining one of those positions without a great deal of money. Therefore, politics is always going to be, under the Constitution, the United States will always be under the hands of those that have money and resources and assets. And that's not really what democracy is supposed to be about. So I would advocate for a legal, constitutional rewriting of the Constitution. Congressional rewriting of the Constitution. Where does that leave us with discussion? I don't really know. I think we got off a little bit off the topic, but that's okay.
No. I think that we said that we would talk about nationalism and globalism, and I also added internationalism in the context of democracy. So democracy is really important, and
We're right on topic.
I don't know. Is there any country that you think it's like the
The perfect
most? I
country?
mean, not. Yeah.
I really like the idea of some of the like Finland. I think is probably. I was researching a little bit of their politics, and forgive me if I go astray, but I recall reading an article that their Congress, once a new Congress is voted in, they flush out the entire body and potentially, you know, bring in an entire new set of politicians. So I think that if that's true, and I can't recall exactly how it was worded, but something like that, where you have a quicker turnover of politicians. You don't have the ability for a politician to stay, you know, a lifetime position, like, you know, the Supreme Court lifetime appointment. I think that's disastrous. I
Yeah.
think that if you have politicians like Nancy Pelosi, who are in position for 20 years straight, and it's extraordinarily obvious that she's been exploiting her position. Maybe I'll get arrested for saying that. I don't know, but
You have
it's
freedom of speech in US. What are you saying?
wow. We have the we have as closest freedom of speech as you can get. I know that you don't have it in the UK, and it's not nearly as prevalent in Europe. And I feel bad for Europeans. I know when I was living in Paris last year, I remember walking around thinking, can I say what I want to a police officer like I could in the United States? And there's no way I would do that. There's no way. They don't have the freedom
I'm
of speech.
I'm in Albania now, so
Well,
I'm
I'm kind
fine.
of surprised on what's going on in UK right now. Right now in the UK, people are getting arrested for having any comment towards the government. They're calling it hate speech. People are getting arrested for just standing outside of a abortion clinic and praying. And it seems ridiculous the direction that Europe is going right now. I hope
We're, we're
it's just a swing, society swings back and forth.
My goodness, I just said something against US and you just like slash killed me.
What do you mean?
So, I
Because we
mean,
have
I
freedom of
just said,
speech?
yeah, and we have it freedom of speech in Europe. Why are you saying that?
Really?
Let's not talk about this. Let's talk it
Okay.
on next episode. Freedom
Okay.
of speech.
Freedom of speech in
Decided.
Germany. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it.
And in France too. I mean, I can bring you so many examples, but in the US too. So
Well,
let's go back to love the example of Finland that you were
well, yeah.
saying.
I think again, I'm probably far uneducated on Finland politics more than I should be. But let's face it, they seem like they're having a good time over there being cold. They seem like they have a very inclusive government that accepts the rights of the people more than the rights of the government. And I think that's the way government should be. That's the Rousseauian way that I would expect government to be.
I was sure, like I was so 100% sure that you were gonna bring Rousseau. Like I just wanted to ask you, like, when are you bringing Rousseau in this discussion? Where is he?
Oh, Jack, that's my boy. Government under the people, not government under the government. I appreciate that. I appreciate that concept. Is there any country
Uh,
you can think of that has a more pure democracy?
I mean, I was thinking about Switzerland, even though I think that Switzerland it's a very complex country, so I don't want to be very simplistic, but you know what I like there? I like the fact that the members of parliament are not full-time members of parliament, so
Hmm.
it's not something that will give them the life-term power or money, so they have their jobs, they are professionals, but they are also participating in the federal parliament. And also, there is not a president in the sense of a fully powerful person, but it's a kind of a rotation between the ministers of the government. But maybe this is also because Switzerland is quite a strong federal country, so the cantons they have a strong like the cantonal government they are very strong, so I think that this kind of federalism has worked very well, and also I think that it's the only country with referendums,
That the people can vote.
like all the laws are voted through referendums, even though sometimes they say that even in these referendums you have a lot of bias because of the campaigns that have been done, etc., etc., but like in theory that would be like the power of people, they are voting for a law, so they are not voting for some people to vote for the laws.
No, I think the idea of the referendum is perfect, and the whole idea of representation was needed before there was electronics and communication. It's not needed anymore. I mean, every politician probably is shaking in their boots, thinking, "Hey, they don't need us at all. They can all just vote on every particular part of their life. They don't need us to represent them." Let's go back because I one part about the Swiss that it sounded very interesting, and it sounded also the elitist opportunity seems like it's going to be heavily vested in a country that you just said they're not full-time politicians. You have to have your own career. That indicates to me that people that need to work all day long to have their life paid for, which is a majority of the people on this planet, they're incapable of being politicians then. Is that the case? So yeah, I'm sure there's some good to it, but there's some obvious negative to it as well. And I'm not trying to attack your selection. Switzerland's a great country. They got mountains. I like it, but I don't think that definition alone is enough to say that they're the strongest democracy, though they could be. Just see an inherent problem with that.
uh, you know what why I like this, because often I see people trying to run for office, if I could say, or be politician just because they want a very good salary and some power. While if you are a professional, like if you are a dentist, or if you are a professor, or if you are, I don't know, a mechanic, so you have your profession, you have your salary, but in the meantime, you also participate in the political life of your country or your region. Why not? I think this is great. You are
Yeah,
not like you're not distanced from the everyday life like the majority of politicians.
yeah, that's what I think that, politicians should be made up of the more of the average people. I mean, I don't guess. I understand that you need to have people that are good at their job. It needs to be a merit-based position for leadership. But I almost wonder if there's a way to have a politics where people don't individually select themselves. You have to get selected by others before you can run, because that will push the idea that individual isn't there at their own stead. They didn't come here to become a politician. They were selected by others without their campaigning. It's kind of a difficult idea to either articulate or to actually get into place, but it's contrary to the idea that an individual stands up and says, I want to be the one. And I think that's kind of a direction that democracy may be able to go in order to have some improvements in how government treats people. I don't know. It's getting a little bit old here.
No, but I mean, you see, and I see how difficult it's to talk about the democracy even in a neighborhood or like even in a country. So that's if we go back to our main point of globalism and internationalism. Okay, I'm not talking about internationalism, but globalism.
You're sneaking
I'm
it
not
in. I
sure.
saw that.
I'm not sure that it will happen in the sense of a democratic government. Not sure it will happen, at least in my lifetime. But what I really want is just what I was saying, that maybe it's idealistic, but maybe it's the easiest thing to do. It's, yes, to build our identity by not throwing the others under the bus. So can we do that? With the level of democracy that we have now, I'm not sure we can do it. So
I can't imagine any state transforming itself to meet the needs of the people. I only see that happening under a grassroots revolution, to be perfectly frank. No country is going to change its system of government to a new system of government because, by definition, that's politicians putting themselves out of a job. They'll never do that.
the grassroots revolution, it really looks like an expression from the feminist movement of the 60s in the US. I like this very much.
All right, well let's wrap it up for then, because I don't think we went too far today. Probably not far enough. I do like the idea of talking a little bit more about freedom of speech within the European continent and lack of freedom of speech, and how it's going away for some Americans. So
And
if you
I
like,
think that
talk about that next time.
yes, and I think it's really linked to this discussion about globalism that it could take like 10 episodes because now with the social media we're so interconnected, but maybe in the same time not so much. I think it could be like a continuation of what we were saying today. So yeah, let's keep it on the freedom of speech that maybe is lacking in the US also as well as in the other countries of the world, which might be a globalist, no, an international issue.
Oh, it's
The
definitely a
lack of
global
freedom
issue.
of speech, yes. Yeah, that's a nice ending of this episode. So
Great. All right,
see you
thanks.
next time.